Welcome to The Next Big Thing, the 2469 Community Podcast. Joining us today, we have Gerard Sansoni, co-founder and director of AHOY, Mahmoud, founder and CEO of Mr. Draper, Gabriel Bacha, co-founder of WeScaleVentures, and Aleksei Dolgikh, co-founder and CVO of Gloc.al.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Next Big Thing. Today, we're talking about being a tech company versus actually being a tech-enabled company. So, guys, what are your views?
Well, I think there's a lot of companies out there that call themselves tech companies, but they're actually companies that have utilized tech and become a tech-enabled company, right? So most of the time, you find a lot of people talking about technologies that they don't really understand, and it's just a word to them. Whereas if you really talk to a tech company, they would drill down to how it was developed and how it was structured and how it was literally, put into place. So that's the challenge.
Do you think that I don't want to position it that being a tech or tech-enabled company is good or bad, right? It's just they're two different types of businesses. Do you think a tech-enabled company should be able to fundraise?
Oh, definitely.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
I think you went straight to the point of fundraising. I think what's interesting is when people masquerade themselves as tech companies and try to get the valuations that a tech company would actually warrant. Mm-hmm. And maybe if I can drill a bit more into that. The reality is when you think of valuations, it's all about how much cash flow the company is going to generate down the line. So the mistake that investors tend to do is basically assume that any company that's growing will end up in the same place. And I think this is where fundamentally there's a big difference between a tech company and a tech-enabled company. Now, maybe to clarify, when we're talking about tech-enabled companies, I think there's a wide range of possibilities as to what the business model is, and it's very important to drill down as to what does the company do? Because let's give some examples. If you think of a company like, let's say Dubizzle or Uber versus let's call it tech-enabled cleaning company, right? Mm-hmm. So one is actually a marketplace. The other one is actually a tech-enabled service in a real way. So Uber is not a tech company. It's a tech-enabled company. But because of the marketplace impact, what you tend to get is it can actually be relatively lean. And really, it's just matching people on both sides. Whereas when you're talking about a tech-enabled cleaning company, let's say it's an app where you can book cleaners to come, the fundamental difference is one can grow a lot more than the other without having to increase its cost. It's really differentiating between fixed cost and variable cost. So if a cleaning company needs to grow massively, they're just going to have to hire a lot more people, and that's in relation to the revenue. Whereas if you have Uber that's going to expand in multiple countries, of course there's some additional cost, but fundamentally the fixed costs are just there, and as you scale revenue, you're just going to make a lot more profit.
Mm-hmm. I think about it like, what are you actually selling? Are you selling technology like a SaaS that other people can use? Or are you selling something through the enablement of tech? And happy to talk about my own experience. And proud to say we are a tech-enabled company, but really at the end of the day, what we're doing is selling clothes. Mm-hmm. But what makes us more efficient is the technology that we have. So e-commerce has a lot of returns, for example. We're able to eliminate that by predicting customer behavior and what they're going to want in their box. Sorry if you guys, I can give you background about Mr. Draper. Like customers sign up, they give us details about themselves. We take that data, bridge it with product data, and then we'll curate a selection for that customer that they can try on at home. They keep what they want, they send back what they don't, and then they give us data and feedback about what they're keeping and returning so we can personalize the experience for them going forward. Mm-hmm. Now, we are currently not selling our technology, but we're leveraging our technology to make our business more efficient. So, for me, that was one of the key differences.
I think that another difference that for your application, for example, you don't have ability to put it in the intellectual property box. But tech companies, they made to wrap their technology in intellectual property box and evaluate it. But evaluation of tech is the most hard part because you exchanging the data with a lot of Microsoft advertising, Google advertising, etc., etc. They have APIs with a lot of APIs. And those APIs inside, in the boxes, they have a intellectual property box. It's kind of a free zone in the whole world that accept as, let's say, your code. Your developers write the code. You put this code in some kind of screening process, KYC of the code, put in the intellectual property box, and selling around the globe with patent, etc., etc. But for applications, it's hard, really hard.
But arguably, I would say that even with the tech-enabled service, you still have some intellectual property. It's just maybe a different form. It's not necessarily a type of code. I would imagine that for you guys, you have a lot of data in terms of preferences, in terms of basically what people prefer to wear, things like that. And that's coupled with the code and the workflow of how to utilize that data is actually very valuable in itself.
And it actually can be a separate business. I think you make a great point. Is that for us to be a purely tech company, we need to actually be a retail company first, because we need localized data to power the algorithm to understand what the local consumers' preferences are. And then in the future, perhaps we can package that and help other brands and retailers develop a better understanding of their customers and their products.
I think the main issue that the sector is having is that a lot of people just build product for the sake of building product, right? Running after a certain valuation to be sold out fast, right? So that's where I think the real problem happens. It's not about utilizing the tech or being a tech-enabled company or anything of that sort. I mean, at the end of the day, it's an opportunity, right? If there's a business for it, why not jump into it, right? Mm-hmm. And in your case, of course, you have your own data sets, you have everything that you need that you can target a wide range of a sector, which is the fashion sector, right? Similarly, there are a lot of other companies that could be, literally, it could be another marketplace that's focusing on a very specific niche. Mm-hmm. But most of the time, a lot of people, they sell themselves as a tech company, I think, in a manner which is tarnishing the image of the ecosystem, right? So recently I found out $1 billion company, right, where literally people have heavily invested in them and they don't even own their source code, right? The source code sits with a software development house back in India. Now that is a huge risk. And how did they get funding?
Are they local?
Right.
Or
I don't want to mention. I don't want to put myself out there.
We
I've just met them.
Gossip a little bit.
I've just met them, so I don't want to break that. But at the end of the day, what sort of due diligence goes into this, right? Okay, if you're talking about investments, like the point that you brought up, right? The biggest challenge that everybody has been having, especially a tech company, is getting funds, right? A lack of knowledge, people don't see the opportunity, it can't be benchmarked, and so on, right? Whereas tech enablers, there's two sides to it. There's one who's really genuinely doing a business, have utilized tech to build an amazing product. And then there are those who go and pick up something off the shelf, right? Beautifully rebrand it, and then go to these VCs and they can sell it at crazy valuations, and they raise crazy money, right? So I think that's a huge issue that the sector is having as well in this space.
And this always tends to be the case when you have people just chasing specific fads. I think one of the biggest problems actually in the last 2-3 years is what's been happening, like with inflated valuations, people just trying to pursue things, right? Same thing happened in crypto, Web3, right? So many new companies were coming out with literally zero business use case. Sure. It's literally just following the fad. And I think what's actually even more relevant today is when you look at AI, what's happening with AI. The reality is down the line, AI is going to be a commoditized offering in a way, and the real differentiation is just the data that you have. So the computation is going to be commoditized, prices are going to go down, and it's really what's going to differentiate you from others is the data that you have. Now, what's happening now is you have a lot of new, like every day you get 2 to 3 new offerings that you really try to understand what's the use case. It's just people layering AI on top of a very simple workflow. And with 90% confidence, all of these businesses are going to disappear in 1 year when things are going to calm down. You have some people that are building a real moat in the sense of putting multiple workflows together, getting the data as well to improve the offering and to really build a competitive edge. And I think this is where data is going to become even more important than what it was before.
100%,
I think for the listeners, if you can break that down a little bit for them to understand the difference in building on top of data that already exists versus creating your own data, like you were mentioning.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So what OpenAI has done today is basically they've scraped literally all the data that's out there that's publicly available. Maybe there are some copyright issues there, but the reality is you have so many companies that have their own data that are not publicly available. That, I mean, just a few examples that I recently came across. For example, McKinsey, which is one of the leading consultancy companies, strategy consulting companies in the world. They have their own documents, their own workflows. Nobody in the outside world has direct access to that. But what they've done is they've trained models on their own data, such that any person can access the combined knowledge of McKinsey. And you can imagine the efficiencies that's going to bring through down the line. Now you have other companies that may have other types of data that may not have leveraged it today, whether it's consumer preferences, whether it's specific data points around traffic in specific countries that you can then leverage to optimize specific routes, to just optimize the whole offering that you're giving to your customers.
Understood.
I think that this is overestimated, let's say, because there is 2 points, like extrapolation and interpolation. And in extrapolation, it's like those Vanga, the person who predict the future. It's impossible. You have only the percentage of the win in this game. Like I will show this in the card, and maybe in this percentage they will buy it, for example. But the real problem with McKinsey, PwC, etc., they made their researches for businesses, and those businesses own this, their research. And those businesses, actually, they are institutional guys, like oil and gas, a big firm. And those guys will move on the AI after, I think, 10 years, maybe 15, maybe 20. I don't believe. I work in the close to pension fund, big bank, and their implementation process, it's like 7 years, something like this. I don't believe that they have a lot of data, not as another companies, because the pension funds, they collect a lot of data, but whole population data, and they don't share this data with anyone. And then they don't do the let's go and integrate OpenAI as a deva here in Dubai, and they don't do it. But I don't believe in the case that the data will be trained and they will help you to decrease your customer acquisition cost. Let's be honest with.
That's a good point, but actually you make me think of something else as well, which is going to be very interesting when it comes to AI. I think we don't want to dive deep into AI in this conversation, but just to make the point that effectively a lot of companies have data, but what's going to be very important is to be able to separate the signal from the noise. So you may have a lot of data, but if the data is not good quality, if you cannot work with it to get good insights, it's going to be a matter of garbage in, garbage out. If you train a model on bad data, you're just going to end up with bad outputs, right? You don't have good forecasting abilities, you won't have good insights. And that's another topic which is going to be very important.
I have one thing in the head that yes, I know one company, Fingerprint JS, the name. They have a pre-seed funding, 15 millions of USD, and they work with the whole internet. Let's say that not on the letter P, and they predict exactly this. They have only one feature: predict bots, garbage data, noise, only this, in real time on your website. But on the high, help me please, when a lot of people will visit your website, like million in the second.
High traffic?
High traffic.
Yes, only for high traffic, because there is an issue.
They analyze your website for what kind of data?
It's fingerprint. Fingerprint is mean you have your website.
So they're trying to predict whether a visitor is
This
a bot
is
or
a
not.
real person, or this is a bot who's scrapping. Now this bot, couple of months ago, we started our advertising campaign in Google and Microsoft, etc. And maybe after 4 weeks, bots starting to fill the form, and each day I receive like 150, 170 fake registration, and they even go deeper. We put the capture, then they pass the capture, and they trying to publish the articles. They're trying to a lot of things. But the question is, this technology already with us in the internet, but we don't know. Do you hear about those startup who raised 50
No,
million?
and I thought that something like that would already exist.
Yes.
Because it happens a lot. But I think we're getting off topic, to be honest. let's go back to tech versus tech enabled. What do you think it's going to take for the Middle East to actually become a tech hub instead of just companies that are building tech enabled businesses? What is it going to take for us to get to the point where we have the capability to invest in building technology that's innovative and built for the first time out of this region, like they have in Silicon Valley?
I mean, there's a lot of companies, to be honest, that are built from the region, right? They're just not getting the right backing, right? So I think it goes down to the fundamentals of the mindset of those who actually have the funds, have the accessibility, and so on, right? A lot of the people today, they focus on what's happening in the West. If it's brought to the region, it's a good product. I mean, we've gone through this many times as AHOY. You know, we pitched and we've showed efficiencies way better than some of the major players in the market. But then they've still looked at us as a startup out of the region. What could they possibly achieve, right? And then they still go with the bigger players. So I think mindset, there's still a whole bunch of, I would say, experienced, I would not want to put the word out there, but experienced people sitting for 25 years in the same position who are afraid of change, right? They have, the lack of knowledge is killing them inside. I mean, some of the stories that I can tell you, there was one gentleman that I sat down with and I showed him that I can create efficiencies in whatever flow he has for his logistics company. And we showed him that the data that he has is with a whole bunch of duplicates, right? That's literally clogged and creating all these duplicate entries for him. And then all of a sudden, we developed a product. We showed them the efficiencies that we created. We dropped them from running over 200 vehicles to 60 vehicles, right? And the guy was simply challenging that and saying it's not going to work in real time. And then he comes back to me in an argument, heated argument, and then he says, how could your solution be more efficient than my sophisticated Excel sheet? Right? I mean, it drills down to that. And I was sitting there and I'm like, wow, I've got data scientists working on this. I've got a whole bunch of guys, GIS, engineers focusing on planning this whole thing for you. And then you throw that question of how can it be more efficient than my Excel sheet? Yeah. So that alone shows that, that it has to come from the core, the roots itself, right? That's where we need to change. So that's what
I think the good thing that's happening in the region is, one, you actually have a governmental push across a few countries in the region, namely the UAE, Saudi. They're actually really vested in actually bringing this deep tech or this kind of cutting edge tech in the region. Now, in reality, that's let's call it, that's the fire starter to basically start the chain of events that's going to lead into that. You need quite a few things, in my view, to actually foster that. And it's an ecosystem of multiple things. I think you need the right educational system, in the sense that it pushes you towards more scientific topics. You need universities that actually will fund R&D projects that will develop this. That's on one side of it. On the second side of it, you need a mature funding ecosystem that actually will allow these companies to, number one, test whatever they're working on, but two, scale, assuming that they find product market fit. And three, which goes back to your point, is, and that's probably the most difficult one, it's going to be when you actually have a technology that can be implemented. If you want to demonstrate traction in the region, you need customers that will accept it. And the reality is, you have a lot of maybe family businesses with older generations that are leading it, that are just resistant to change. And I think this may take time as you start getting the newer generations that are becoming more educated, more open-minded, that will be willing to actually test these things internally, whether it's at their companies, whether it's developing these things.
And you can see that the younger generation has taken those steps. There are quite a few people that I bumped into who are actually having traditional businesses, mega businesses, and they're actually looking to find, change and bring in technology into that. Some of them have even invested in technology companies just to see how it is, right? So, you rightfully said, it's going to take time, but then how fast can we get off? So that's the question here.
I see like
So-
a chicken and egg problem,
Yeah.
where it's like we need to create an ecosystem where businesses like us are getting adapted and not discounting a technology like AHOY versus a global player just because you are from the Middle East. That's one thing. So by doing that, you're basically limiting the opportunity of AHOY to exit in the future. And at the same time, like if you look at now the ecosystem, which is quite nascent still, it's quite relatively new. A lot of money that's coming into the ecosystem is from people who have been incredible at building traditional businesses in real estate and oil. And they're putting money into VCs, investing in technology, and the people that are managing the money in VCs don't necessarily have technology experience.
Sure.
They're ex-investment bankers and consultants, and they're playing with other people's money, with all due respect. I think what we need to get to a point of where the ecosystem and the investors in the ecosystem have built technology businesses themselves, exited those businesses, and now have the money to invest in tech.
So tech entrepreneurs becoming
But we
VCs.
can't get there unless they stop
right.
discounting tech that we build here, because we are built from here instead of being a global player.
You're 100% right, Mahmoud, because actually in the US, and I'm taking the example of the US as a more developed or more mature market, you actually start seeing a lot of these new generation of funds that are basically founders investing in founders. That people
Exactly.
that have been through it, that have been successful, that
We
are
founders
backing
something.
founders.
Like we founders, examples. Do you have examples?
So right now I don't have the.
No, no.
Have examples in the US?
Yes.
Like
yes.
Peter Thiel, build pay for it.
No,
Oh, sorry,
the
not pay for it.
communities like
Pay-
we founders or something, or we found.
Oh,
You know this? I
No.
forgot. That they invest, like you just register on the platform, and if you
No, that's
crowdfunding.
but that's not what we're talking
Not
about.
what?
No, we're talking about founders that have exited their companies that are now running their own VC
Yeah.
funds. Actually, one example that I have in mind is Aleksei, who is the founder of Reddit, for example. He's now running his own VC fund, and he's basically leveraging the experience he's had in starting Reddit. But number two, he also has a massive network, and this is how he's helping startups that he's investing in.
I need to go on there. I want to add to your point. There is a company, Cloudflare, content delivery network, and even they generate now one billion plus, and the growth is 40% year by year, and they sell only like CDN tech. It's real tech. It's not
CDM tech?
CDN, content delivery network.
Okay.
And this is real tech company. But when those guys trying to raise the funds, it's impossible. They find only one industry, and this industry give those guys the money, and only one. But this is impossible in this region,
Oh, it's not impossible. I think it's just going to take time. And we're at the very beginning of
I
the
thought
ecosystem.
about the tech from those industry that actually run the internet. 80% of the internet flowing with.
So the reality is you also need to differentiate between having homegrown champions that are basically serving the region versus having international players that are basically doing the same thing. Sorry, the point I'm trying to make is there may not be a need when it comes to certain services or certain technologies to be developed locally if you have a global champion that actually does it already. Because the last thing you want is to build something where you have no competitive moat. And the only thing that's really driving this is the fact that it's a homegrown company. And I think so that's what you're referring to, Aleksei. The reality is, I think we're talking about something where we want to go is somewhere different. Is basically having a completely new technology or something cutting edge that's built in, that's coming from the region. And that's where I think, going back to your point, Mahmoud, it's just going to take a bit more time.
Yeah. It's already happening, actually. If you look at the Korean founders who've exited to Uber,
Yes.
they're already investing in startups or building other businesses. And that's the very beginning of a healthy ecosystem, but it's still early.
Yeah.
So when it comes to actually creating more value. I think something which is quite interesting, which is probably the other side of it, rather than go down the tech route, is actually how can you implement more technology or tech workflows in traditional businesses? Because it goes back to what we were talking before. I think there's a lot of value to be extracted when you have a cross of brick and mortar businesses with technology. So whether that's an offline supplier or and it's probably actually very similar to what you're doing, really, right? It's really having a traditional business that typically does everything, let's call it manually or back-end, that's not connected with other services. When you bring in the tech element to it, that will kind of create efficiencies, potentially reduce headcount, maybe provide a better service overall. That's where I see a lot of value. And it goes back to the point that there's a lot of businesses where people are reluctant to change. So maybe that's something that the new generation is actually going to push through.
Yeah, the change has been so far from paper to Excel sheets.
Exactly.
And everybody
From Excel
promoting a product today is literally their backends run by Excel or Google Sheets or some sort of a sheet, right? So it's how you educate those traditional businesses as well. We found out that as a lot of traditional business, they're willing to invest to change, invest to bring in efficiencies. But unfortunately, the people promoting these products in the region are those who have come from out. I don't want to say where they're from, but they've proven their technology outside in the Western world. They've got a beautiful, fancy name behind them, and they come here and they approach them and say, "Listen, we've got this market share," right? So again, it drills down to the lack of knowledge of understanding technology, what it is actually, and how you could create efficiencies around it, right? So yes, you can have a beautiful, fancy portal that you can receive orders on, but if that portal does not, optimize it in a manner which understands, okay, I need to go picking of apples, picking of the whole flow, if it's not integrated, if it's not connected through a proper back-end infrastructure, and you still have a whole bunch of people seated behind there looking at an Excel sheet to understand, okay, I need to pick apples, I need to pick oranges, and literally go and do that themselves. That's not really, benefiting from the technologies out there, right? So that's not a real tech company again. It drills down to you're just taking anything that was on paper and putting it on a sheet, and there's still people running it, right?
Yeah.
And again, I'm not trying to say that you need to get rid of the people, but at the end of the day, I think you can use those people, their time, to do something more creative, more efficient, right? Get them to learn something new so they can go out there and do better sales, for example, if they had to, right? But that's one of the concerns that we've faced as well. With AHOY, we've built multiple products and we've showed efficiencies around quite a few things. But then adopting is very slow here because they've already been introduced to a fancy name, someone who's raised a lot of money in the past from the West. I mean, amazing. At the time when they launched, they had that advantage. That was the only technology available, so it was amazing. But things have changed. Today, there's a lot of new things that have come up, right? There's a lot of new technologies that have been launched. So it drills down to the person trying to sell that product. This region, because it's small, because there's a few players in the market who have actually addressed or written their names on stones, everybody is running after them. Right? And I've seen a lot of those companies. And then eventually when you sit down, you have a team of 200 people literally planning what's supposed to be done. Right? One of the largest trucking companies here. I won't mention names again, but then again, the entire workflow, the entire process is run by a bunch of people. So you have an amazing application, you have an amazing portal where people can actually log in, place the orders, request for everything. But then the entire workflow is done by by people. Why couldn't you automate that? Right? Yeah. Again, it drills down to the knowledge in this part of the world as well.
I think actually one way to address this, I'm not saying I have the solution, but typically what you see, what you don't have is you don't have people who understand what the actual business needs of specific businesses are. So you need alignment between specific verticals, industries, and the service that's being provided. Let's take an example. If you have let's say a health clinic, right, and they want to streamline things, the reality is, I think today they just have to use multiple different products, patch them together to try to get something that's half efficient. That means you need to get a separate CRM, a separate booking system, a separate so on. The reality is, I think if you have people that understand the vertical and what the actual requirements are, and you patch together these services into one offering and one SaaS offering. So basically, all the needs are immediately met. Then I think this is one way to actually address the market. Now, on the flip side of that, one thing which may slow down the progression of that is the fact that realistically the market here is not as mature or as big as in other countries. And that's why when you go to bigger countries, whether it's Western Europe, the US, you have 1,000 companies that are just addressing one vertical rather than a horizontal service. And you don't see much of those here, just because the market is not big enough or not mature enough.
I mean, one of the things that we found is that we do a lot of BOTs now recently.
BOTs?
So we build, operate, and we transfer, right? So we don't try to shove any product down anyone's throat. At the end of the day, you have a beautiful product that's working fine for you. How can we either, make it more efficient, or what are your pain points, right? So understanding your pain points and building a solution around that has proven to be beneficial to us. Because at the end of the day, I'm talking to you as a partner, and I'm not trying to sell you something. Most of the time, I found that even people, they don't even want to try new things, is because they've tried one, they've failed, and they think that, someone's just trying to shove something down my throat. Whereas if you sit down with them, have an honest conversation and say, guys, listen, I don't want to give you anything, right? You have a beautiful product that's working. One part of the business is working fine, right? How can I help you with all the other things, right? If it is in my domain, that is, right? So if I am focused in the domain of movement optimization, I can, you've got something that is dispatching all your orders to your drivers. How can I create efficiencies around journey management, route planning, making sure that you're at a certain destination at a certain specific time. So if I can create those efficiencies and give them a product that could plug into their existing solution, now that is something that would make them feel welcome, right? Okay, come. So we've had that, we've done that, and it has proven to be a much easier approach for us, right? When it comes to tackling the family of the traditional businesses. But
when you're talking to these guys, a couple questions. One, who are the domain experts in the company that you're speaking to? And two, do you feel like you're speaking to the first generation or second generation or third generation of that business?
So, let's start with this. We got to a guy who was running, let's talk about the logistics product, right? So we got to a guy who was running their day-to-day logistics, who turned out to be very traditional. He's stuck on his sheets, he loves his sheets, and everything is going fine, right? And coincidentally, during that same meeting, we had a chance of meeting the VP of that company. Now, the VP of that company was new blood, right? He's a young guy. He's not an old guy as well. He's a young guy who is fascinated about technology. And when we sat down and had a chat with him, he had that impression that, listen, I don't want another product. I've gone through so many things, right? I want to build my own, right? So he was sick and tired of the whole, let's keep trying and change after 2 years kind of thing. And he said, I want to build my own that is addressing my concerns. So that aligned with what we were doing, because that's exactly what we told this guy who was running the logistics. So he called him up and he said, okay, guys, let's do a workshop, right? Take a day or two, understand what our pain points are, what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. Let's talk about what we're doing wrong and how we can change that. My expertise, 1, 2, 3. I know people who are able to do X, Y, and Z. So I'll say, listen, it's a collaborative effort, right? So we sat down with 3 different companies, right, who have 3 different beautiful products. Again, infrastructural grade. We're not just plug and play. And we sat down and we said, okay, you need IoT solutions. You need infrastructure from us. You have an existing beautiful portal. Let me connect the 3 together, right? So we gave them the tools to integrate all of that together and actually address their pain points, right? Rather than building from scratch and trying to. We could have done that. We could have built something from scratch. But it's going to take time. But you already have spent millions. So let me not burn you more. Let me focus and see how I can really address the pain points.
Yeah,
that is something that I think a lot of people should adapt, because everybody is after legacy today, right? My product, my this, my that. I mean, at the end of the day, okay, you'll be bought out one day, you might die, right? But if you actually work with people who actually can complement you, you have a better future, to be honest, right? You can go to market much faster. There's so many other opportunities that you can tap into. And you would understand down the line that, listen, you know what, I built a product, but it's actually not addressing the problems. I've just built something that is competing with another product. Let me solve the existing problems. So for me personally, right, I have done quite a few things in the region, right? For the last 16 years, multiple different sectors. And I've loved sales. I've learned a lot about, how to sell what. And it comes down, what I felt was, it's all about that connection that you make with that person, right? It's not about trying to sell them a product, right? You'll sell them a product the moment you've understood what their pain points are, right? So you sit down, you have a chat with them, a general conversation with them, right? And that you will know, okay, you know what? These 3 pain points that he's talking about, I have the solution for it. Now it's about how am I going to talk to you to get you convinced.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, if we're talking about tech versus tech enablement and the adoption of locally built tech businesses, just a question, yeah, high level. Do you think it's a good approach if you're selling a tech solution to do a results-based pricing model, whereas, we don't make money unless you're optimizing or you're making money?
I mean, it could be, again, it depends on the type of business, right? It depends on the sector that you're tapping into, right? Not all businesses would be like, okay, if you make money, I make money. It doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's more consultancy it's more, based. Exactly. It's more for, a business where if it is something that we have mutual interest in, if we're vested interest in, for example, if I'm developing a product and it's a proof of concept to me, right? I don't mind telling you, utilize it. When you make money, I make money. Mm-hmm. That's the first step. But if I have a proven business that's actually working, has a logic behind it, and you don't know how to sell your product, right, why should I be penalized for it?
Yeah, fair enough. That makes sense.
So I think it
depends on what stage of the business
which
that
stage
you're
of the
in.
business that you're in.
Going back to what you said, Gerard, the biggest problem of how companies position themselves is that they go to a customer, and I've seen that with a lot of companies we've worked with. They go to a customer, that's the pitch. We're the best. We're from here. We're from there. The reality is, when you have this conversation, there should be no we, there should be no I. It's all about you. I need to understand your problems. I need to understand what's going on with you and how I can best serve you. And honestly, this is the best way to approach sales, because the moment you're talking about yourself or trying to pitch something, they're immediately going to go on the defensive. And when you put yourself as a potential partner that's really vested in understanding their problem and trying to solve it, then the dynamic completely changes.
Yeah. The moment you try to sell, you've already lost them.
Yeah.
Right? But if you try to find out, have a chat with them, understand what their pain points are.
Build a relationship, basically.
Build a relationship,
Exactly.
And don't sell on the first day.
Okay.
This is what has helped me, to be honest. I never try to sell on the first day. First day will be like, general conversation. What are we doing? How can I help you? Let's go grab a coffee. Let's chat.
Nice.
Something of that sort, right? And then eventually what I found is they will come back to you. They will ask you questions. And that's the time that I would say, you attack. I say, what?
It's like pitching.
Exactly.
You never actually pitch. You go and you just tell what you do, and if they're interested, they're going to ask you.
So a lot of our conversation has been focused on how you're serving businesses. Mahmoud, I'd love to hear your perspective as to how you do it when you're talking to individuals.
Well, I do. So it's not one-to-one sales, right? It's we've built a marketing funnel, and what's really challenging what was really challenging in the early days is actually explaining how the service works. And it's all about just creating very effective user-generated content of people actually going through the process of using our service. And what's been more challenging is getting brands to adapt to our business model. And that's something that we've had to build around. Again, being like tech versus tech enabled. This is a tech-enabled approach, whereas we are building things that don't exist to optimize our existing business. So for our algorithm to work, we need 2 sets of data, customer data and product data. The products that we work with in terms of close comes from distributors. The distributor data is very minimal. So if we're talking about this polo, the distributor data will say it's a navy polo, it's a size medium, and it's from this brand. For an algorithm, that means nothing. So we've had to build a solution that basically can look at the products and tag it with more attributes to help us understand how to match it to customers. So this polo in our system would be 2-button, 100% cotton, pattern polo that's navy and it's a slim fit. That helps us, but that solution doesn't exist with the distributors. So that's been the difficulty. It's more on the supply side than on the customer side. So let's segue just real quick for our last topic today is in terms of developing or having tech talent in the region to build tech businesses, not tech-enabled businesses. Do you think we're there, was the first question? And if we're not there, how can we get to a point where we have that tech available in the region, so that tech talent available in the region?
So I don't know if I have the answer to that, but the one thing that I've noticed, meeting with a lot of people, seeing what's been happening in the region, is what you tend to see is you actually have very talented developers, very talented tech people, but what they're lacking is the business sense. So they're working on,
100%.
they're very good at what they do, but they're not solving a problem. Goes back to what we were talking about before. The reality is you may need to mix the tech talent with somebody with commercial sense, put them together, or maybe the other solution is to find a way to educate them more as to how to think about solving a problem rather than just being narrow. Now, the reality is, I think the best approach is to let people do what they do best. So I think having a matching platform where you're matching tech talent with business-oriented people or industry experts that tend to understand the problem within their industry, I think that's where you can unlock good efficiencies. And I don't know what you guys
I agree.
think.
I mean,
Gerard, you guys are building like a very deep tech solution. So how do you go about finding talent?
it's been a challenge, to be honest, right? So this region, especially you really can't find the talent that we want. Right? That's why we have to look outside. But at the end of the day, it goes back to the first point that we're discussing, right? Having the right universities here, so it again goes back to the support that you get from the country itself, right? So if they bring in the proper universities, the proper institutional backing that they need, you will find that tech talent here. Not to say that there is no tech talent. There's a lot of talent in the region, but it's just not there yet, right? And to maintain this talent, right, you have to, most people, what we've felt and as on AHOY is, in order to maintain talent, you need to show them that they belong in that product as well, right? Mm-hmm. Not just a salary per se and that's it. Mm-hmm. This is your product. You need to make them feel that, they want it for that. Because the moment you open that door where you say, okay, you have an amazing engineer, right? The moment, let's say another tech company opens up tomorrow that offers them a better salary, they will jump. At the end of the day, it's human nature, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to make them feel belonged, right? I think that's the relationship that you have to build with them from day one. And again, it goes back to the sense of, yes, you need them to build that business. You shouldn't be the one building it. They need to take that initiative, exactly, sense of the ownership of it, and build that product so that they feel that, this is my product. Most of the time what happens here is someone sits down and says, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, this is what I want you to build, take it to your team. That's it. So it's like monkey see, monkey do. They go, they fix it, their life is good. But the moment you tell them, listen, you know what, I want to build a product, 1, 2, 3, how would you build it for me? What exactly are you going to do for that product? How are you going to make it different from whatever is out there? Now that incentivizes them to actually take ownership and say, you know what, I want to be in this company. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what people have to look at, not just the talent per se, but it's about how you make them feel belonged, how you make them feel welcome within that community and that team. So culture again, the culture that you maintain within your company. So
very cool.
That's why
and the one thing that helps in terms of getting the talent into the region, actually, there's a lot of benefits in the region in terms of quality of life, in terms of attraction. I personally noticed that a lot of foreigners have been wanting to move to the region. Yeah, I get called up every 2 days for people living in Europe telling me, how is it to live in Dubai? I'm very interested. Tell me more. So in a way, that could help. Sure. But I think fundamentally, giving them this sense of ownership, the sense of pride of being part of a specific business is the way to go about it.
I have a different opinion. They just simply need to make second-hand market of the technology. Like I have this OSS. I made to have my personal cheapest one technology in package, and just have a second-hand market as they have in Japan. They sell the one application for 30k USD on second-hand market, and this will help to bring the real tech businesses in this region. Just second-hand market of the technology.
No, I think honestly, it's a great place to be at a great time. I think a lot of people are going to want to come here. I think the ecosystem is getting there. I think building communities like this is exactly what we need to be doing, where we're all supporting each other. It's just doing things for the sake of helping each other and not for like, you know, you scratch mine, I scratch yours. And I think it's a great way to end this segment. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you,
It's
everybody.
pleasure
It's been a
speaking with all
pleasure.
y'all, get
Pleasure.
to know you all. And tune in
Likewise.
next time for the next big thing.